I wanted to ask you, so is your brain mush from doing all of these debates? Because if you're like latching onto the verbal tics, you've been listening to these candidates talking for way too long.
5 debates. I watched all the other Harrell and Wilson debates before we did ours, and there had been like 4 or 5 ahead of time.
So you're as sick of looking and listening to them as they are of each other.
Actually,
they clearly cannot stand being around each other anymore.
They see each other more than their families and friends. Oof. Yeah, that's for sure. But weirdly, the more I watched, the more I got fascinated by certain things. Like my brain was entertained by Harrell saying best practices 9 times in a debate, and Katie Wilson, every time she's asked a question, says, great question. So
I never noticed that.
You have to entertain your brain.
What have we done to your brain, Libby?
This is the question I ask myself every day.
You have election brain.
Yes.
It's election brain season.
That probably means it's time for Sound Politics.
Nice.
Welcome to Sound Politics, the podcast where we explain political power in this Washington and the other one. I'm Libby Denkmann.
And I'm KUOW politics editor Cat Smith. Scott's on the bench this week because...
Wait, I have it queued up. We got to hit play. Hold on.
Scott has a personal conflict covering the Seattle mayor's office. And today's episode is all about that job. So R.I.P. Scott. We're also going to talk about...
He didn't die.
For the purposes of this episode, he is dead.
He's just in Lurb.
Love ruins everything. And unfortunately, he can't talk with us about the direction the city is going to be taking over the next 4 years because he's in stupid love.
Yeah, we had a showdown at the old KUOW corral this week. It was a real rumble in the U District. It was a debate. I moderated a debate between Mayor Bruce Harrell and challenger Katie Wilson. And I think we can say that these two have a number of significant differences in approach to big policy questions, right, Kat?
Oh, boy, do they. Yeah. And you and I, Libby, are going to catch everybody up on what happened in that debate between Wilson and Harrell and explore the contrast between those two candidates. So you ready to dive right in?
Yeah, I'm ready, but just really quick, because I know we're going to get to pretty meaty meat and potatoes policy kind of talk.
Very nutritious content.
Yeah. Can we have dessert first?
Ooh.
Because I want to talk storylines and optics just for a quick minute.
A little aperitif?
Yes.
A treat before the main course?
Exactly. An amuse-bouche.
Dish it up.
Does it feel a little weird to you that a first-time politician who was prior to this managing a nonprofit with a budget smaller than many household incomes in Seattle, like the Transit Riders Union has a $200,000 budget yearly. Mm-hmm. Katie Wilson is poised to unseat Bruce Harrell, who has been in elected office at City Hall for 16 years.
First on the council and now as mayor.
Yeah. I mean, she absolutely creamed him in the primary by almost 10 points. And unless something significantly changes about that dynamic, like, she will be mayor.
Yeah. And when you see these two together, they couldn't be more different in approach and in their background. Bruce Harrell, he's from working class roots and deep roots in the Black community in Seattle. Yep. He's the guy, he was captain of the football team, successful lawyer, longtime politician. And he's got a life story that he likes to weave into his speeches and answers on the campaign trail because it's very compelling.
Yeah, he talked about his mother being interned in World War II as he was talking about how it shapes the way that he thinks about federal troops in Seattle. And then you have Katie Wilson, who is very cerebral. Mm-hmm. She is white. She grew up the child of academics in New York State, relatively privileged.
A word that she herself likes to use.
Yeah.
She uses that word.
Yeah. I mean, she dropped out of Oxford 6 weeks before graduating. Her story is less about upward mobility like Harrell's is, mm-hmm. and it's more about rejecting kind of a posh background and choosing a life of working hourly jobs as a lab tech, a remodeling contractor, mm-hmm. at a bakery. She's got like this CV with all kinds of jobs in it. And then the community organizing is kind of the thread that starts to bind it all together, mm-hmm. and her being in solidarity with the working class as a socialist.
If we were in high school right now, I think these two, different as they are, they'd be sitting at very different lunch tables. Like if it was Mean Girls, Harrell's the jock and Katie Wilson is the nerd.
Wait, where do we sit then?
I mean, I'm part nerd, so I'm at the nerd table probably. I'm not as nerdy as her. Like that woman can talk policy all day long. I can't keep up.
Yeah, I'm somewhere like off, eating lunch by myself. I'm not even at a table. I'm not saying that Bruce Harrell doesn't get into policy, because he does. Like when we say Wilson is a wonk, like he can also rattle off numbers and things, but he shines more, and I think he gets in the pocket of where his campaign is comfortable when he is like connecting emotionally with audiences. I don't know if you noticed, Kat, but his answers, he was speaking directly to the audience, whereas Wilson was talking to me. But Harrell is more in that mode of there's people in the room, I'm going to make eye contact with all of them. And he stayed back to talk to a couple of voters about a niche problem in their neighborhood after the debate. Really old school retail politician stuff. Whereas Wilson shines when she's rattling off the deep understanding of complicated policy proposals and why, certain choices were made when certain taxes were built, things like that. And she's really finding her footing more with the public speaking, emotional side of campaigning as she goes.
Yeah, Bruce is the showman. She's the wonk. Wilson herself even says that when you strip away the policy talk, like what else is there to her? She's so deep in policy minutia that it's part of her identity, and she admits that. And she's still way more comfortable talking with people one-on-one. Like you said, she likes to make eye contact with you when there's a debate setting. She's more comfortable talking with people one-on-one instead of a big group. Yeah. And I think, it's when there's a bigger crowd that she starts to get more reserved. If she wins in November, we'll get to watch how she improves at the public speaking over time and how she gets stronger in front of a camera. Right now, you can tell she's still a little green. And of course, Harrell likes to bring up Wilson's inexperience at campaign events and sometimes the P word that we talked about, privilege.
Privilege.
Yep. And there's a PAC that's backing Harrell's reelection that's running an ad on TV. You know the one.
Oh, yeah.
I think we have a clip.
What's the highest budget you've ever managed? How much will your plan cost? How many employees have you managed?
Several paid employees.
So that's that ad where she's sort of in her, I think, first debate of the general election, one of the early ones on the City Channel with Brian Callanan. Yep. And she kind of gets caught up and deer in the headlights looking when she's asked about these experience-related things.
That ad is rough. I will say there's some out-of-context editing moments in that ad. They're not being super fair to her. There's some really tight editing. Like you said, those clips were from a debate back in September. They've done like 20 of these now. She's a bit better. But those sighs and long pauses, at least one of them, Bruce Harrell had been coming at her with the same question like over and over and over.
Yeah, it was annoyance partially.
She sort of looks at the moderator at one point, and that's when they caught that sigh where she's looking at the moderator like, are you going to step in here? Like, what are we doing here? So not totally fair. But that ad is making a point. Like, she can't answer the question about her plan for like housing homeless people in Seattle, about
how much it's going to cost,
how much money that's going to cost the city. Yeah, she can't answer that, and she really doesn't have the experience managing a large paid staff. Points are being made there, and they're being punched up with some disingenuous editing. I don't know how I feel about this ad. One thing is sure, a lot of people watch that. A lot of Seattle Mariners fans were on that ad during the baseball playoffs.
Yeah, that's where I saw it for the first time and many times after that. And that's really pricey real estate for ads. I mean, as of my last check of the Public Disclosure Commission website, which, it's not always updated in real time, both of these candidates have a similar amount of funds in their official campaign war chests. So that's like what the candidates can raise directly themselves. But the independent PAC supporting Wilson is just getting swamped by money flowing into Bruce Harrell's PAC. The Pro Harrell group has collected more than $1.6 million so far. And a lot of that has been spent on TV ads, like what you just heard. Wilson's PAC has about $350,000. So, I mean, that's just like a huge mismatch in outside spending here in this race.
Since we were talking about the Mariners, I was surprised to see one of the Mariners owners being a top contributor to the Harrell PAC.
Oh, yeah, a couple of them, actually. Yeah, John Stanton gave $50,000. Chris Larson, who's another minority owner of the M's, he also gave, former Microsoft guy. There's a lot of real estate cash going in to support Harrell, similar to his last election. Wilson is getting labor money from grocery workers, UFCW, and the Union for Public Employees. But again, it's It's a lot less than what Harrell is getting.
Okay, so let's get into how these candidates handled your questions, Libby, at the KUOW debate this week.
All right.
First up, let's talk about homelessness.
It often feels today as though we've actually given up on meaningfully addressing homelessness.
Katie Wilson's general election campaign message can be summed up pretty quickly. She accuses Mayor Harrell of not doing enough to address two things: affordability and homelessness. So it's no surprise that she accused Harrell of, quote, passing the buck here, of not doing enough and trying to kick the blame for not making more progress on homelessness to other cities, other entities besides Seattle.
So yes, we want other cities to step up and contribute more, but the mayor's the mayor of Seattle, not the mayor of those other cities. And, we have hundreds of tiny homes, empty tiny homes, sitting in storage lots in Interbay and Sodo. We need to find sites for those homes, and we have operators that are ready to operate those tiny house villages.
Yeah, Wilson's made big promises of standing up 4,000 units of shelter, emergency housing, and or supportive housing. It's kind of a block of different ways to get people off the street. If she's elected, some of those would be those tiny homes. Some would be an ambitious plan that we talked about earlier, Kat, that, doesn't really have a specific price tag on it yet. It's untested. This program would convert empty, affordable housing studio apartments, which we have a lot of them right now, that would convert them into supportive housing for unhoused folks. And it would be very expensive. She's talked about diverting the affordable housing levy that voters approved in 2023 and adding new revenue to do this. And, the logistics of how to provide services, if you would consolidate all of those vacancies, they're not entirely clear. But she says that there is such urgency here that we have to think big about homelessness. And I think that would resonate with voters who want to see a big change. Bruce Harrell, though, well, he's not a believer in Wilson's big plans, right, Kat?
No, he is not.
It's a bad idea.
And Harrell has said many times Wilson's plans have no price tag. She's putting out unrealistic pie-in-the-sky ideas, and he says that she doesn't have the experience to see them through. And as a point of contrast, Harrell points to some progress in his tenure, thousands of shelter referrals and people moving from shelter to permanent supportive housing. And he says that he's proud of the 3,000 units of shelter or emergency housing that have opened while he's been in the mayor's office, even though...
that number.
Yeah, you pointed that out in the debate. Yeah, a lot of that funding... a lot of that funding happened before he came into office, too. Overall shelter capacity specifically basically has not budged in Seattle because we lost a lot of beds during his tenure. Harrell does spend a lot of time explaining why this happened, though. COVID dollars went away. Other cities, Seattle suburbs, aren't really stepping up with funding. But he does seem incensed that Wilson would accuse him of trying to pass the buck, of not owning these deeply entrenched problems that have been visible in the city for the last couple decades.
And it's pretty offensive that when I've been working on these issues for 16 years and thousands of people before me and are working with me right now, and my opponent has zero background in doing this work. If you look at what she's done, she's had zero effort in this work. And to think that anyone in the city would not be passionately trying to figure out a best practice to shelter people, it's almost offensive.
The mayor takes umbrage. Did I use that correctly?
You did, yeah.
I really wanted to use umbrage.
That sounded pretty umbragey.
I take umbrage from that umbrage. Wilson, by the way, says her work to pass the Jumpstart tax, the payroll tax on big businesses back in 2020, that shows that she has been working in the housing space at least for several years because that money goes towards affordable housing. One thing that I feel like these two candidates do actually agree on, Kat, is the failures of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority.
Yeah.
Also, they both say that the problem of homelessness, though, can't be solved by Seattle alone, that there has to be a regional approach here. Harrell talked about streamlining the agency so that it is more focused on sheltering people rather than generating policy. He's taken away powers of the KCRHA since he's been in office. Seattle has. And he's been negotiating hard, he says, to get these other cities on board to pay their share. Wilson added that, there's probably a cost to starting over with a new agency or a new solution. So she also would be trying to make KCRHA work, but would be open to other options.
Surprising when these two find points of agreement, but it does happen in this campaign sometimes. Okay, let's move on to public safety and policing. Wilson used to support the idea of defunding the Seattle Police Department up to 50%. That was back in 2020. She doesn't talk about that anymore today in 2025.
Well, she has to because Bruce Harrell brings it up and people like me bring it up in debates, yeah.
She would rather talk about, in 2025, adequate staffing levels and how hard it is to be a cop.
My team has been having a lot of conversations with officers, with former officers, with other folks in the public safety space. And this is an area where, I realize that I have a lot of learning to do. And so that's why we're having those conversations.
And of course, as you said, Libby, Mayor Harrell has been vocally underlining the 2020 part of Wilson's history.
Yeah, I mean, he said basically that her changing positions on the police department scare him.
Just a couple of years ago, she was quoted as saying, "Imagine a Seattle without a police department." And my opponent denied saying that until we furnished it in writing. She was also vocal opponent to defund the police department. What I said is communities like mine, Black and brown communities, will suffer the most.
Yeah, he meant proponent of defunding the police department. For her part, Wilson talks a lot about learning and the learnings about alternatives to police that happened in 2020, and then the learnings about how, community policing can actually be beneficial, things like that. The word learning comes up a lot.
She's evolved on the issue.
Yeah.
And she went on the attack on a few elements of public policy.
Yeah.
One, she claims that because Harrell has not properly addressed the homelessness crisis, that it's increased street disorder around the city. Mm-hmm. And she's also deeply critical of expanding the real-time crime center cameras, that controversial CCTV camera expansion to try and curb gun violence and street disorder. Harrell supports that policy. But Wilson has said basically that the information from those cameras could be used by federal immigration agents.
Yeah, and she's concerned about tracking people who might be seeking abortion services, things like that. To which Harrell says, we would shut down the system if the feds tried to access it. I did ask Harrell, too, about the city's drug possession law that he helped draft and sign. That was part of the whole Blake fix situation where there was a domino effect. Yes, we have to, go back to the Blake fix, of course, that the state Supreme Court had declared drug possession laws unconstitutional. Now drug possession is a gross misdemeanor in Seattle, but people are supposed to, according to the law, be offered treatment as a first option. The King County Public Defenders Association argues, however, that it's not working that way.
But this gets really complicated, though, right?
Yeah, the numbers are disputed here. The public defenders pointed to a new report they put out that very few people, only 6 people who were charged in the first couple of years of the law ended up actually in treatment. But the city attorney's office was like, no, that's because most people are offered diversion before they're charged. And what the city attorney says, it works out to more like 48% of people getting into treatment instead of being charged. So, people would say, well, 48%, if you're supposed to be offered treatment as a first option, then the law maybe isn't working as well as it should be. But Harrell says that it is working.
This is tough work right now. We have to look at people who are dying on the streets, but I also have to protect the streets. And that's what an executive does.
Wilson is one of those who says the law is not working as intended. And like she often does, she brings the issue back to the housing and homelessness crisis.
And I think what we're often seeing in this moment is that even if you're able to get someone into treatment, there's often nothing at the end of that for them. And so this really goes to taking a holistic look at our whole system and making sure that we have those realistic pathways to permanent housing with support that people really need.
That's fine for her to say that it sounds compassionate, and she's not wrong about that necessarily. Something isn't working. I mean, Bruce Harrell can talk about whatever results are going on behind the scenes that people can't see. But, I live downtown. There's an awful lot of human suffering that's pretty visible out there.
Yeah.
And from Katie Wilson, I would have liked to hear a more concrete plan for improving those systems that Harrell has overseen that she's now criticizing. Like, if this is what the problem is that you're identifying, this leak that you're identifying in the system, what concrete steps are you going to take to plug that leak? And I don't think I heard that from her in this debate with you. Should we wrap things up with taxes?
Let's wrap things up with taxes, you know?
Let's end on a fun note.
It's the most fun, right? Let's talk city budgets. You know, actually, this part did kind of upend my expectations. I don't know about you.
No, me too. I mean, what I heard was Bruce Harrell, who's part of the more moderate wing of Seattle politics and usually more reluctant to turn to new taxes. He starts declaring how tech companies like Amazon must pay their fair share and touting the new taxes that he's been backing lately.
Yeah, he's kind of went on like a corporate, you know, step up and pay your fair share rant at the end there. He talked about the B&O restructure and the public safety sales tax that he's trying to get going. The public safety one just passed, and then the B&O is on the ballot this November.
Yeah. And then Katie Wilson, as we said, socialist, progressive. She championed the payroll tax on big companies like Amazon. She was basically saying, we do have to be cautious about driving businesses and rich people away. There could be a tipping point with new taxes.
People are shocking us here in this debate, Kat.
Surprising to hear that from the two of them.
Yeah, let's go to the tape.
Companies respond to incentives. Individuals respond to incentives. And so we have to be mindful of that, right? And so I absolutely think that we're going to need to seek new progressive revenue here in Seattle, but we're also going to have to be cautious about how we do that. And we're going to have to look at the data. We're going to have to look at how companies are responding.
Wilson basically saying there, there's a tipping point in Seattle where we could lose jobs if we tax big companies. But she also said, the state could help us out if the legislature were to pass like a similar payroll tax to the Jumpstart,
which they looked at. They didn't pass it last time, but might come back. Yeah.
And so it would credit Seattle companies, and that might level the playing field so you might not see jobs leaving the city anymore. And she thinks that there are also opportunities with a local capital gains tax, a vacancy tax, other ways to tax the rich. And she will not let Mayor Harrell forget that he'd be in a way bigger budget crisis today without the Jumpstart tax that she championed.
Yeah, I mean, that's inarguable that the Jumpstart tax has bailed out the city in a big way. I do think Harrell is walking this interesting line with the revenue conversation, and I don't think he's always messaging it very coherently. Like, he used his political capital to help get this business and occupation tax restructure on the November ballot, which, if it passes, it's going to really shift the burden away from small businesses more onto larger ones. That was with Alexis Mercedes Rink. Now, Katie Wilson has kind of taken shots at him, saying that this was a election era shift for him on taxes, and that partnering with Rink was a political move to seem more progressive. But I'll leave it there. He did the thing. So that is something, again, that's going to be more progressive in that you're going to ask bigger businesses to pay more. But then the sales tax increase for public safety, though small, I will point out, is a sales tax. It's the opposite of progressive revenue because it hits the poor to a greater degree. On Jumpstart, he's saying, of course, we needed it to balance the budget, but it did drive some jobs away. And also, by the way, tech companies should have to pay up.
Amazon still made $60 billion. Microsoft made $80 billion. They have to pay their fair share when they're extracting money out of our society. Make no mistake about that.
5 seconds.
But I also have to calibrate making sure we don't have job loss, because I want jobs downtown in the different business districts throughout the city.
It just felt a little all over the place. I don't know about you, Kat.
Yeah, no, I'm listening to you introduce that cut. You were making some good points, and it made me real. I think I know what Harrell's trying to do here. I think I know why this sounds like all over the place. So he is saying we have to tax rich companies because that's only fair, but taxing them is going to scare them away. And then I remember back in the primary, like you mentioned a minute ago, Wilson accused Harrell of revamping the B&O tax as a way to suck up to the tax the rich progressives at the last minute and try to steal some of Wilson's supporters away. And at the time, I thought that was kind of a cynical take, but maybe that is literally what he's doing now, too. He's trying to appeal to the people on the far left who support Wilson, tax the rich companies, and the moderates who support him. We should be afraid of scaring businesses away. And at this point, he needs all the votes that he can get. And he's probably really, really trying hard not to alienate anybody.
Yeah. I wonder, though, if he can possibly grab the progressive mantle from Wilson, because she is literally a socialist. And she has like so many bona fides with that crew. So that's the debate. Kat. That is how it all went down at the KUOW studios on Monday. And, we are going into the final couple weeks here while people have their ballots in hand. They're going to be mulling over these candidates. And I think if we just kind of take a lean back moment, if we take a little drag on our coffee or, something that's going to make us feel like political philosophers here, there's always that question with an incumbent of whether this is a change election or whether people want consistency, right? I was talking with David Croman, Seattle City Hall reporter for the Seattle Times, and he was saying, I think this election is really about change versus consistency, and voters are pretty upset right now with the direction of the city, and so that's what Katie Wilson is really able to capitalize on. But I also wonder if this is kind of about generational change. Like, Bruce Harrell is just from an older school era of Seattle politics. And there is kind of a young feeling with Katie Wilson where she's willing to try new things. She's willing to kind of go on the TikTok, make her pizza videos, things like that. And it's not like Katie Wilson can't do retail politics, like organizing the way she did against cuts to King County Metro and with the Jumpstart tax, whatever. Like, there's real organizing old school skills in her toolbox. But I can't help but feel like we are seeing a changing of the guard in terms of generational, differences at Seattle City Hall. Like Alexis Mercedes Rink, she's a super young, different kind of progressive who she's not the firebrand that Shama Sawant was. She is a coalition builder, but still very progressive. She's working with Bruce Harrell, for example.
On the B&O tax.
You hear Katie Wilson like shifting her message on defunding the police and moderating and, finding ways to not be scary, basically, for Seattle voters who, are ready for change, but maybe not ready for like a revolution, So that's where I'm at on this. It feels like generational shift and, whether or not the money pouring into Bruce Harrell's campaign can make a difference here is the big question for me.
And Katie Wilson, I think she would be our first millennial mayor of Seattle. Talk about generational shift.
Wow, yeah.
And I was kind of reflecting on this point last year. Like, if you had told me we would be this close to the election and Bruce Harrell would not be the front runner, like, I don't think anybody saw this coming. This was kind of a snoozer. It was supposed to be a snoozer of a race
at the start of the year. Yeah, people thought it would be.
Yeah, we were barely covering this race, and now all of a sudden it's like maybe he can come back from a 10-point deficit from the primary. It's going to be really tough. He did underperform on primary night the last time he ran against Lorena Gonzalez. I think he was only up a couple of points. He was still up on primary night, but he didn't do great, and then he ended up winning the election. So we're going to have to see. But if you had asked me a year ago, holy smokes, I would never have thought that we would have been here. We talked to a political consultant about Katie Wilson's campaign recently, and she was basically like, there's something in the air. There's a change on the wind. There's a change on the wind. You see it in New York with Zoran Mamdani. You see it here in Seattle, like you mentioned. There's dissatisfaction with what's going on at City Hall. I don't know if it's like a Trump effect, it's freaking people out and making them jittery, or if people just simply are not happy with the 4 years of Bruce Harrell, or it's the curse of City Hall. We've had a string of single-term mayors, and we don't like to keep our mayors around very long. Maybe this is all just part of it. But the consultant we talked to about Katie Wilson's campaign said there's something in the air. She's got a real chance, and I think that is really amazing. This is going to be a really exciting election to watch.
Wow, that consultant went out on a limb saying she's got a real chance.
She did say she's got a real chance. Quote, she's got a real chance.
The person who won the primary by 10 points has a real chance. These consultants, where do I sign up for that gig?
That's a sweet gig.
That's it for Sound Politics today. I'm Libby Denkmann.
And I'm Cat Smith.
Our show is produced by Sarah Leibovitz.
Our editor is Cat Smith. That's me.
Wow.
I do it all.
Oh my gosh. She's amazing.
I am amazing. Thank you. Scott will be back next week. But if you want to show him and us a little love, consider donating to Sound Politics, because we can only make this show because of support from you. Donate to keep our show going by clicking the link in our show notes.
And get ready, because next week we'll have a procrastinator's guide to the November 4th election.
You're welcome.
See you then.